When a serious crime is committed and the police need all the help they can get, there's one group of people they turn to time after time: the expert witnesses.
An expert witness is critical because they're going to have that deep level knowledge to really determine if something stands out that doesn't look quite right.
An extraordinary army of men and women with the expertise to reveal the hidden clues criminals have left behind.
My brain just sort of exploded with different ideas. Even a single-celled organism can solve a crime.
They search harder and look deeper, using the very latest techniques.
We're constantly evolving, constantly improving. It's soon going to become impossible to get away with murder.
This is the inside story of how science helps solve some of the UK's most complex cases.
That was one of my eureka moments in all my 30 years of forensic examination.
The chances of finding something were really incredibly slim. That tiny possibility had to be explored.
I've seen people talk about justice being done, but no matter what kind of punishment he faced, it would never be enough.
This is the story of the expert witness. Some criminal investigations are so complicated, they involve a number of expert witnesses. In this programme, we examine how forensic evidence from a whole team of scientists turn a missing person case into the hunt for a murderer, and then into an investigation into one of Britain's most notorious serial killers.
Forensic biology, including DNA, has now become pivotal in convictions and solving many crimes. And we're constantly evolving, constantly improving. It's soon going to become impossible to get away with murder.
Glasgow, September 2006. Across the city, police are searching for a 23-year-old woman, Angelica Cluk.
She is a responsible young woman. In the time she's been working, she's never been late for her job, and last night she failed to turn up.
Angelica was on her summer break from university in Poland. She was living and working at St. Patrick's Church. Angelica's sister, Anita, was desperate for her return.
She wouldn't just leave, walk away. She just wouldn't. I know her, she wouldn't. I really hope and I pray that Angelica will be back soon and she will be back in one piece and safe and sound.
Detectives began an extensive search of St. Patrick's and made a shocking discovery.
Police say a Polish student whose body was found in a church in Glasgow has suffered a horrific attack. 23-year-old Angelica Cluk, who'd been staying at the church, went missing last week.
Angelica's body was concealed beneath a trapdoor in the floor of the church, wrapped in bin bags. Detective Superintendent David Swindle was the senior investigating officer.
What happened to Angelica Cluk is absolutely horrific. It was aggravated even more by the fact it was in a church, a place of worship, a place where people should feel safe.
David was determined to find out what had happened to Angelica. He began by calling in expert witness and forensic biologist Carol Rogers, a specialist in gathering evidence from the bodies of murder victims.
You're only getting one shot at a crime scene. You've got to get it spot on so that nothing's compromised and that we gather the best evidence.
Carol's first step was to search Angelica's body where it was found. She was looking for clues to explain what's happened to her and who was responsible.
I was adamant from the get-go that I wanted Angelica to stay where she was in situ. And that posed difficulties because she was beneath a trapdoor which was tiny. We just have to fit down there and do our work. Every crime scene's a little bit different in the approach you're going to take. With Angelica's case, the fly of her trousers was undone and she had cable ties tied round her wrists and her hands. I could see this as a violent crime and it's likely to be sexually motivated. So the traces we're looking for are skin. Is there any DNA from a perpetrator? Body fluids that will give us DNA. Hairs, fibres, anything like that that could have come from the suspect onto Angelica.
Only when Carol's examination of the body was complete could Angelica be moved from beneath the floorboards. Then, bioarchaeologist Dr. Jennifer Miller took over the scene.
When most people think of archaeology, what comes to mind is Roman bathhouses, standing stones and ancient tombs, but forensic archaeology applies the same methods that would be used to excavate those ancient relics to modern-day crime scenes.
Jennifer's job was to carry out an excavation of the area where Angelica was hidden to recover any exhibits that could be relevant to the murder.
When you're recovering evidence round about a body, you set up a grid, which means that you can recover every piece of evidence or all material that could be evidence from that area below the floor in an accountable manner. If you don't do it properly, then that evidence may be lost. You only ever know what you find. You don't know what you miss. This is a representation of the grid that was created below the floor of the church. This would be what you would see as you look below that trapdoor for the first time. In amongst all that 120 years of dust, you've got things that are there relating to the construction of the church. But you've also got some unusual things. One of the interesting things we found was a dead, dried box bush leaf right beside the body. There's no reason on earth for a leaf of that kind to be underneath the floor.
Detectives were convinced it was significant. They found a box bush growing in the church grounds. Beside it, a stash of bin liners identical to those Angelica was wrapped in.
At this point, it became apparent that Angelica's body was in a deposition site. We didn't believe she'd been assaulted there.
Detectives needed to find the scene of the murder and expanded their search to other buildings on the church grounds.
The garage was full of tools, paint, bits of furniture, etc. And it had a grey concrete floor. And we just started looking and saw a blood spot on the floor, and then another blood spot, and then another blood spot. And these are tiny little blood spots. Just started circling them, and within a short space of time, it was apparent we had a spatter of blood spots on the floor. And we found blood spots on the walls, on the ceiling. The picture we got was that Angelica had been assaulted within that garage.
Nearby, detectives found the likely murder weapon.
There was table legs recovered within the grounds of the church, and we found trace amounts of blood on one of the table legs.
Samples of wood that had been found in Angelica's hair and in the wounds in her head were identified as ash from the table leg.
Jennifer found even more intriguing clues from her excavation of the deposition site.
Some of the most relevant evidence that we found below the trapdoor are several flakes of green paint and a kind of grey-green paint.
Angelica was last seen painting a shed the same colour in the church grounds.
We found a brand new roofing nail. Angelica was helping make the shed in the garage with roofing nails which were identical to the one found beside her body.
A box leaf, paint from the shed, blood in the garage. For Detective David Swindle, it all pointed to one person, the church handyman, Pat McLaughlin.
He actually gave a statement saying that that day his little apprentice, as he called her, was working in the church painting.
But Pat McLaughlin had disappeared, and inquiries revealed he had a dark past.
The concerns were pretty evident at that time that the person named Patrick McLaughlin was not Patrick McLaughlin. His name was Peter Tobin, a missing sex offender.
Peter Tobin was now the prime suspect, and detectives began a nationwide manhunt.
They get an update from the Metropolitan Police that Peter Tobin was in a hospital in a false name. We didn't have evidence to say Tobin had murdered Angelica Cluk. There was a warrant in existence for Tobin in relation to breaching his sex offenders order, so he was detained on that.
As police made the journey to question Tobin, lab testing began on the evidence Carol had recovered from Angelica's body.
So the first stage to the laboratory work would be examining the swabs that were taken from Angelica's body, just to check for any body fluids, anything that might obtain a DNA profile from that could provide a name for the police. There's different qualities of DNA profiles depending on the source. So if you have blood, which has a lot of DNA, you're going to get a nice full DNA profile. If you're looking at skin cells or a trace amount of DNA, you might get a partial profile, or quite often you also get a mixed DNA profile, which means there's more than one source of DNA, and then that has to be interpreted quite carefully. So from the examination of Angelica's swabs, we got a full male DNA profile.
Carol ran the profile against the national database, and she hit the jackpot.
We got the call that the DNA had been identified as Tobin's. That is a real break.
And the DNA evidence didn't end there.
So when Peter Tobin was arrested, his possessions were seized, and we got quite a lot of forensic evidence. On the lower front of his T-shirt, we found a stain that was a mix of DNA that matched Angelica Cluk and Peter Tobin, and we also found blood that matched Angelica on the bracelet of his watch.
To David, the forensic evidence revealed what had happened in Angelica's final moments.
He had taken advantage of Angelica Cluk, his friend who trusted him. He had hit her over the head with a table leg, and then whatever happened thereafter, he had dragged her in a plastic sheet across the yard into the church and dropped her in underneath the floor. That is the most likely sequence of event that happened.
On the 23rd of March 2007, Tobin faced trial at the High Court in Edinburgh. Carol's forensic evidence was the cornerstone of the case against Tobin.
I was 2.5 days in total giving evidence, which is probably still to this day the longest I've stood in the witness box giving evidence. It's really tough, but the forensic evidence was compelling and it spoke for itself, really.
A convicted sex offender has been found guilty of the rape and murder of a Polish student.
Peter Tobin always denied what he did. Today, he was defiant to the end. He was described by the judge as an evil man and a danger to women.
Peter Tobin was sentenced to life in prison. It was justice for Angelica.
But that was only the start of what was to happen as regards Peter Tobin. There was an element of organisation, methodology about this. And this is someone that travelled throughout the UK. He used aliases. We knew from his index offence, he was a sex offender, that he had tried to kill 2 young women in Havant near Portsmouth. And he had seriously sexually assaulted them and left them for dead. I believed that he'd killed other people.
David Swindle was convinced Angelica Cluk was not Peter Tobin's first victim, so he launched Operation Anagram to examine Tobin's life. Where was he living? What was he doing? What nearby crimes remained unsolved? His investigations led him to 2 murder cold cases, but only evidence from expert witnesses could reveal if these were also the work of Peter Tobin.
Cold cases are particularly challenging for forensic science, but thanks to advancements in technology, we can now uncover evidence and uncover secrets that have been hidden for decades.
Bathgate, Scotland, 1991. 15-year-old Vicky Hamilton was visiting her sister and was last seen waiting at a bus stop, but she never made it home. Her father, Michael, reported her missing.
From day one, I started to worry. Definitely started to worry. I said, there's something not right here at all.
Divisional Commander of West Lothian Police, Tom Wood, immediately took action.
There's a number of options. What has happened? Has she sought shelter? Has she been picked up by somebody? We started to do a larger house-to-house and search, starting from the place where she was last seen and moving outwards. There was never any trace of Vicky.
A few weeks later, Vicky's purse was found in Edinburgh city centre. But the case went cold and her family were left without answers.
As the years go on, you say to yourself, there's nothing coming out of this. Are we going to ever find Vicky?
It's very, very difficult because you don't have a body. You're not sure if a crime has been committed. You suspect it has, but you don't have really anywhere to start.
But 16 years later, Operation Anagram uncovered a shocking link.
What we didn't know at that time was that Peter Tobin lived not far away from the place she was last seen.
In 1991, Peter Tobin lived at Robertson Avenue in Bathgate, barely a mile from where Vicky Hamilton disappeared. New forensic developments meant examination of Vicky's purse could finally yield results.
Originally, it had been looked at and it was a mixed profile, nothing could be done with it. But with advances in technology, we were able to obtain a DNA profile and it was a familial match. And I believe the match was with someone who could be a son of Peter Tobin.
When Vicky disappeared, Tobin had a 3-year-old son. Now, police suspected Tobin had given him the purse to play with. But Tobin was refusing to help.
Is there any way that you can assist us in finding this girl now?
No.
Her parents don't know, or her father doesn't know where she is, her family, we don't know.
Sorry, I can't help you. You wouldn't know. As I say, I've never met her.
Experts were called to examine Tobin's former home. Peter Faulding, a forensic search specialist, was one of them.
I get brought in to look at cold cases. People have been missing a number of years and looking at search strategies that could potentially find these people. The top of the garden was a key focus because we had intelligence from the neighbour that he dug a large hole in the garden many years earlier.
Jennifer Miller was once again called to the scene.
Our main area of interest was a very unusual rockery, which had no purpose in being there in the garden. It just looked out of place. And from experience, things that look out of place usually are out of place. We had to go below the ground surface and then continue below that. So we had to go quite far down Thereafter, the geophysics equipment was brought in.
One of the pieces of kits used was ground-penetrating radar, also known as GPR.
I'm going to take you out to one of my test graves that I used to teach forensic students on search techniques, and it's ideal to see how the GPR actually works. I can constantly test different types of soil, different objects that are laid in the ground, and see what their signatures will achieve. This is a test grave, and you can see the clear depression. This is 3 years old, but you can clearly see there's something's disturbed that area. It's not normal ground. So we're going to run the scanner over the land, and as I push the machine over, the results will come from the radar head up into the computer, and then I can analyse that using the software. This was the results of the ground radar scan in Peter Tobin's garden in Bathgate. What we've got here, there's lots of red and lots of greens, but if it was an undisturbed ground, we would just have general straight lines. What we've got here is a big jumble of different types of signal, and in particular a large anomaly here, which needed further investigation by the archaeologists.
They dug down over 2 meters, but there was no sign of human remains.
You look back from the evidence from the neighbour, at one stage that was backfilled. And my belief is that Vicky Hamilton had been murdered, she'd been placed into that hole, how long for we don't know, and then moved at a later date.
The team then turned their focus to the loft of the house.
There was a dagger concealed in the corner behind the rafters in a very good hiding place. This was gold dust to us. The knife was put into a forensic tube and whisked off for urgent analysis.
You're looking for trace levels of skin cells or trace levels of blood. What appeared to be skin cells were noted on the knife. They obtained a DNA profile that matched Vicky Hamilton.
16 years later, they finally had conclusive evidence.
We were speechless. It's clear now that Tobin is responsible for the disappearance of Vicky Hamilton.
I says, well, at least we're going somewhere now in this case, but I don't want a knife. I want Vicky. Where's Vicky's body?
"400 miles away in Essex, Operation Anagram uncovered another link to Tobin.
We established from inquiries, Essex Police was dealing with an investigation that could fit the parameters, and that was the missing person, Dynamite Nicol.
Dinah McNichol was 18 when she attended a music festival in Hampshire in 1991. She decided to hitchhike home, but never arrived.
I was the one who actually raised the issue. I sort of said she should be back, and it was so out of character for her.
There was too many things about her. You know, she had completely disappeared, and there were issues about that where she'd been picked up, her and her boyfriend at that time, got a lift from a nice Scottish man. And then she had some money in her account, and there had been withdrawals from that account on a route, and the route was the route towards Margate.
In 1991, shortly after Vicky's disappearance, Tobin had moved from Bathgate to Kent.
Peter Tobin lived at 50 Irvine Drive in Margate.
Police investigating Dinah's disappearance began a search of the house with forensic teams. It wasn't long before they made a discovery in the garden.
I got the phone call to say that they had found a body, and I thought it was Dynamite Nicol. because that's who we went there to look for. And he said, no, it's Vicky Hamilton.
The suspicions that Vicky had been moved from the rockery in the Bathgates garden were confirmed. They had the knife with Vicky's DNA, and now they had her body.
They continued digging, and then they found Dinah buried further along from there.
She'd been bound and gagged, and her body wrapped in rubbish bags. On those bags, police found 4 fingerprints, which they say matched Peter Tobin.
16 years after disappearing, both missing girls could finally be put to rest.
The one thing that we wanted was a body, and so we could have a burial. So as much as it was heartbreaking, it was also sort of a big relief to get her body back.
Actually, I'm glad that we found Vicky and that we found the person that did it, and it's all over and done with.
Already serving a life sentence for Angelica's murder, the true extent of Tobin's long criminal past has emerged.
He is a serial sex attacker and killer.
Once again, evidence from expert witnesses was essential to the case against Tobin. It offered the jury a compelling account of his crimes.
Trial lasted for just over a week, and then when they went in to deliberate, I think they were in for 10 minutes. It was for a murder trial. They said it was so quick, it was unheard of.
Peter Tobin received a further 2 life sentences.
We are hoping we can now move on as a family and start to remember Vicky as the loving sister she was before she was so tragically and cruelly taken from us.
Really, really important thing to me is the work that we all did actually help other people hopefully get a little bit of peace.
The forensics, the expert witnesses have been absolutely fantastic. You know, they worked really, really hard to make sure that Tobin had nowhere to go.
David had identified the killer of Angelica Cluk, Vicky Hamilton, and Dinah McNichol, and made sure that justice was done. The key to it all was forensic evidence.
I could not have done what I did without the expert witnesses. It is only because of experts that they're able to convict people for crimes like that. The passage of time should not be detrimental to the detection of crime. It shouldn't matter how long it takes to find out the truth. It's a search for the truth, no stone unturned.